Max Verstappen got a €50,000 fine for fingering Lewis Hamilton's rear. It's true, in a way. That is a fact. Max Verstappen at the Brazilian Grand Prix in Sao Paulo did finger the back of Lewis Hamilton's car and got a €50,000 fine for it. He didn't damage anything. He didn't break any technical regulations. There was nothing untoward about what he did in terms of he wasn't attempting to gain any insight on the car. He wasn't trying to damage the car. He was just genuinely pointing out something which he thought was illegal, and it turned out was illegal. So what happened and why is it not allowed? In Formula 1, on a race weekend, when you send your car out for qualifying, it is then under what is known as parc fermé conditions. Parc fermé means closed park in French, but is used in this circumstance to denote that a car cannot be changed in any way other than it within permitted regulations, such as something that is damaged and requires replacement. You can't make any performance changes to improve the car's speed or downforce under parc fermé conditions. So what's the backstory to this? Lewis Hamilton, during the qualifying session for the Formula 1 sprint in Brazil, ran a rear wing which had a DRS flap which was 1mm too wide for the regulations. Technically, that's illegal. It was noted by the FIA that they weren't attempting to gain a performance advantage by doing this. In other words, they weren't attempting to cheat. They had a broken part on the car, and the only flap they had available was that one, which was against the rules. This was somehow fed back to Max Verstappen. I don't know if it was fed back by his team. I assume it probably was, because at that sort of speed that they go at, 1mm difference, I don't think you're going to notice. But at the end of the qualifying session, Max walked up to the back of Lewis's car and he touched it. Oh no! It is against the rules. There is an example on record that when Nigel Mansell won the British Grand Prix years and years ago in the 80s or the 90s, he was swarmed by British fans. British driver, British fans, British Grand Prix. People wanted to go and celebrate with him. You wouldn't get on the track these days just that easily. But he had to make sure that no one on the track touched his car. It would have got disqualified. It would have breached parc fermé conditions. It's a long-established tradition. Now, I say it doesn't break any technical regulations because there are two sets of rules in Formula 1. There are the technical regulations, which determine how a car is supposed to be constructed, and there are the sporting regulations, which are how the teams and drivers are supposed to conduct themselves. In this instance, Max Verstappen touching Lewis Hamilton's car was seen as a breach of parc fermé conditions, and he was immediately subject to a €50,000 fine. If he were to have just looked at the alleged discrepancy on the car, which was then later proven by the FIA, there'd have been no further action. But you're not allowed to touch your competitor's car under parc fermé conditions. You shouldn't really be doing it anyway, to be perfectly honest. You don't need to touch someone else's car. You've got eyes, you can look at it. Well, one of the reasons you're not really supposed to touch the cars is, again, written into the sporting code, is that if you are touching a component which you believe may have a performance advantage over your car, they don't want you to be able to attain that knowledge in an unsportsmanlike fashion. Technically, to compete, the teams must use their own intelligence and their own plans and their own cunning and witting and mechanical knowledge to outperform other cars. They shouldn't resort to outright spying on other cars. Now, this was done years ago by McLaren, and they were quite heavily punished for it. And rightly so. So while this was a very minor infraction on parc fermé conditions, it was an infraction on parc fermé conditions, and a slam dunk 50 grand fine was imposed on Verstappen. Harsh, but to him, that's nothing really. Hopefully, this video has gone some way to explaining the parc fermé regulations in Formula 1 and the FIA Sporting Code, and why, yes, it's true, Max Verstappen fingering Lewis Hamilton's rear did get him a 50 grand fine.